who will also be moderating this session. For everybody who didn't get a chance to meet Bozhidar in the first session, I'm pleased to give you a little reintroduction to himself. So Bozhidar, thank you for joining us. You are a Bulgarian journalist, media researcher, and fact-checking trainer. You're also a PhD candidate in the European Studies Department at Sofia University and a member of the Association of European Journalists in Bulgaria. It's great to hear that your research expertise lies in this field of disinformation, with its focus on how it spreads, the strategies people use to spread it, and what this fact-checking process is that currently works in Bulgaria. So please, David, and I'll pass back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, George. Hello again to everybody. I hope you had a chance to rest and recharge during this short coffee break. We are delighted to have you back here with us for the second panel, and in this session, we are fortunate again to have three amazing panelists who will share their insights on the production, spread, and debunking of disinformation. The speakers, Laura Bante, Sara Ahnborg, and Dr. Kiely. I remind you to ask any questions. Feel free to ask questions in the platform chat. Our panelists will try to answer as many questions as possible. And we will forward any remaining questions, if any, to the speakers following to the webinar. I'm sure that they will be very pleased to respond to them. Again, please indicate which of the speakers you are asking your questions to. So the first panelist of the second session is Laura Bante. Laura is a Swiss content creator specializing in comedy and lifestyle topics. She fits the literal definition of an influencer. Since 2021, just a couple of years ago, she has established a community of hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok and Instagram. She holds a degree in European law from the University of Amsterdam and has worked as a social media journalist at the German radio station CVR. Today, Laura will share with us her experience and offer a closer look into the processes of creating information online. More specifically, she will reveal insights into how to create engaging content and build audiences on social media. Hi, Laura, the mic is yours.
Hello, thank you so much for this introduction, and thank you for having me here. So I guess I will start out by sharing my screen. So let me start to do that. Okay, I just need to authorize it.
Just a second.
So normally I authorized it now. So you should be able to see my screen. Okay, there we go. Can you all see that?
Yes, everything's perfect.
Wonderful. There we go. Little technical issues that we sorted out. So thank you very much for this introduction, and thank you for having me. I'm really grateful to be here today and to be able to share a bit more about my social media experience and to hopefully help detecting fake news within the EU context. So I thought about introducing myself, but actually you did it so well that I just have it summarized here. So just that I have like a 3-year experience, I guess, now in social media. So hopefully it will be helpful what I will tell you today. So I want to really talk about how do you actually get views on social media? How do you hook people in and how do you make them view your videos? So I first want to debunk a myth that a lot of people have actually. It is not a matter of luck. I know a lot of people think that because it's very impressive when you have a video with millions of views and you think like, wow, that person must be so lucky. I hate to break it to you, but it's not luck. It's a clear-cut strategy that people use in order to become successful and have their videos viewed. So what is it then about? What's the secret? So it's really about creating engaging content that immediately grabs one's attention and is then easily shareable with friends and family. So how do you create that kind of content? First of all, you need to create a hook within the first 3 seconds of your video. That's really important because people need to know what they're going to see in the video and actually why they have to stick around. Because viewers these days, they have such a short attention span, and it's very easy to just scroll past your video. So you really have to hook them in and tell them why they should not miss out. Here are some examples that are prepared for you so you can get a better grasp on what actually a hook means. So stop doing X. I'm going to tell you why and what you should do instead. And if X is an activity that like 90% of people do, you are sure that they will stop scrolling because they will feel like you talk to them. Here are 3 reasons why you shouldn't do X. I'm going to show you how you're going to have the best date of your life. This is going to blow your mind. I will never recover from learning this information. X happened, and here's what we know about the situation. So what most of these hooks have in common is that they have this huge emotional aspect to them. They are triggering, relatable, bold statements are made for you to stick around. And they're also very black and white. Like you're doing this thing either completely wrong and I'm showing you the right way, or this information is completely false and I'm going to provide you with the correct one. So there isn't much nuance. So you can see how that could get problematic when you spread news, because news have to always be very nuanced, put into context. So I think you get a little grasp of that already. Number 2, you have to have a high percentage of watch time. This means that the longer someone watches your video, actually, the more it is likely to go viral. So you need to make sure that the person doesn't only stay and stop scrolling, but that also that the person watches the whole entire video. So how do you do that? You can do that by using some tricks that I'm going to give away today. Quick edits are very good because they're very stimulating to watch for the human eye. We're constantly stimulated. We have new information, new images, and that works really well. Emotional background music is great. It doesn't just work well in movies to get us crying and laughing, but the same thing is true on social media. So you can really touch our emotions like that. Unexpected things occurring. If the viewer is surprised, then that's a good point because he will be like, oh, so many things are happening here. I have to stick around. Tell the viewer to watch until the end. That is so easy and it works every time. You have to ask the viewer to just stay until the end because the viewer will then be rewarded. And since the viewer then is curious to why he should stay until the end, he is going to stay. We are very curious human beings. We want to know what we don't know, so we're going to stay. And then lastly, you can just create a video with a high emotional aspect all throughout. Is your video incredibly funny all throughout, or sad or shocking? All those strong emotions are present, and then the viewer will stay. Number 3, you have to have a call to action. Okay, so either you ask the viewer to comment, save, or share. I feel like liking has become really natural for the viewer now. And most travel vloggers, for example, will say at the end of their video, share this video with someone you would like to visit this place with. And then people do. But if you wouldn't have asked for it, maybe they wouldn't have done it. So it's really good to do that. Fake news also use that strategy, and they create this sense of urgency for you to share the video, claiming that it's so important for the truth to spread as quickly as possible. So then that also works. Before I leave, I wanted to provide you with an example of fake news on TikTok, since that is the platform that I'm most active in. It's about the submarine story that happened earlier this year. I'm sure you heard about it. And so a vessel was supposed to reach the Titanic, but it never did, as the vessel imploded. That's a very tragic story. So as you can sense it, perfect for TikTok. In fact, many content creators picked up the story, and here are some examples of the hooks that they used. This submarine story just hurts my soul so much. The Titan submersible story just got a lot scarier. The Titan 5 passengers knew their fate a whole minute before the vessel imploded. And those videos were paired with a very scary music in the background. So that's perfect for going viral. But some of the videos were problematic, like the videos of the audio footage from the vessel imploding, where you can hear actually the screams of the passengers in their final moment. So very shocking. And in just 10 days, the first video had 4.5 million views. And you can hear the cries, last cries of the passengers. So then those videos were reposted with the same audio, and the story became more and more viral. But turns out that that was completely fake news. The audio wasn't from the vessel at all, but it was from a video game series called Five Nights at Freddy's. But the TikTok went viral much faster than the fact check truth. So since TikTok is such a viral platform, it is unfortunately perfect for fake news. So to conclude, I would like to say that in order to get views, your video needs to be highly entertaining, have a considerable emotional aspect to it. So it's really not surprising that misinformation goes viral much faster. I feel like it's really a race between false but interesting and emotional information that triggers you and true but boring information. And that's why I'm so grateful to be part of that webinar today to raise awareness about that, because we can encourage people to be a bit more careful on what they consume online and to not believe everything, because we should never forget that behind every viral video, there's a clear-cut strategy to get us all hooked in. So yes, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this brief presentation. You said so many interesting things so briefly. Thank you very much. I'm gonna give the stage to our next panelist now. Our next panelist is Sara Ahnborg. A little bit about Sara. She's a press officer at the European Parliament Spokesperson Service. Since the creation of the unit in 2018, she has been in the team on disinformation, working on awareness raising and coordination. Between 2020 and 2022, she was seconded to the Secretariat of Parliament's Special Committee on Foreign Interference. Before joining the spokesperson's unit, Sara was a press officer for different parliamentary committees. She is a very experienced journalist who began her career in Brussels as a freelancer. Sara will share with us insights on disinformation about the European Parliament and elections. Sara, if you're ready.
Yes, I am. And also, thank you so much for inviting me. And it was very, humble to speak after Laura. I will speak about very different things, about the disinformation we see around the European Parliament and around elections. As you know, we will have European elections 6th to 9th June. So we are looking into that a lot. I'm going to share my screen as well. Yep. Let's see. Do you see it?
Yes, everything's fine.
Okay, good. So it's yeah. So disinformation is something that concerns the members of the European Parliament are very concerned. Roberta Metsola, our president, says it's, of course, disinformation is as old as the world, but new tools like artificial intelligence, social networks give it an unprecedented reach. And the objective is to attack democracies and to sow doubt. As you mentioned, Parliament had a special committee looking into foreign interference, and I worked with it a part of the time. And what they are worried about ahead of the elections is that disinformation will make it difficult for citizens to make informed choices or even discourage them from taking part in in elections altogether, and they worry that it will be more in the next 17, 18 weeks until the elections. So in the EU, we have a special team. It's not my team, but in the External Action Service, they have studied pro-Kremlin disinformation narratives, and there are a few coming back over and over again. And I think if you hear about them, you will recognize them later. So one is, they call it the elite versus the people. So they say they have nothing in common, they are against each other. In some countries, you have the threatened values, that this elite, for instance, will not make us work like our family values or other values, religious values are under attack. We have lost sovereignty or threatened national identity. It's something coming back over and over again. And if the first three are about a very powerful EU or leadership, the fourth one is kind of the opposite, but it still works. It's that about the EU or the West is about to collapse. And our colleagues have then branded a fifth one, which they call hahaganda. It's just making fun of everything and ridiculing all democratic processes, all democratic actors. I will show you an example a bit later on. And since Russia started the war against Ukraine, like a sixth one is a special one on Nazi Ukraine and linked to that. So if we look at the European Parliament, just for you who are not familiar with it, there are some things that makes it kind of easy to target. It's a complex
Sara,
parliament. We have 705.
Sorry for interrupting you, but your slides are not moving.
Oh, okay. So could you share them? Because we have this kind of backup option.
Just a second. Yes, we will share it. Can you stop the share on your end?
Yep. So sorry about that. In the meantime, I can. Oh yeah. Okay. So I think I was on slide 5.
We will ask you just to say when we need to change the slide.
Yes, of course. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. And you can make it maybe a full presentation. No? Fine. Perfect. So the parliament is complex. You have 705 members from different political groups, 27 countries, 24 languages, 400 to 500 hours of plenary debates every year, and 24 parliamentary committees, in addition to some special committees. And most of this, of the text of the videos, are public and online. I'll show you a quick example if you go to next slide. So this is about the report on foreign interference. We try to put everything online for citizens and media, civil society organizations to follow. So just what you could find here, I'll show you in the next slide why this is important. We had on the oh no, go back please. So on the upper left, there was a hearing with external experts. So you have recorded experts who are invited to give their views. On the second, so foreign interference at a glance, that's a study by in-house researchers. You had a group from the social and a webinar by the socialist group about foreign interference, a press release on the upper right from the liberal group, the Renew group. And then you have coming amendments or a suggestion to change the text from the center-right group, the EPP. And then on the bottom, you have Far East team addressing. It's a question from one member, in this case, a Green member, to the Commission. And then we have on the bottom right, a lot of video recordings. And then on the bottom left, the official position of the Parliament. This means you have kind of a gold mine of authentic information. If you're into this information, you can go through this, and whatever your opinion is, you will find a quote, you will find a text. It's a part of the decision making in the European Parliament, but all these things play very different roles. And if you want to know about the Parliament's position, you would go to the bottom left, text adopted. But before that happened, you had all this dynamic debate with different opinions, political groups trying to change the mind of the others, experts trying to change the mind of MEPs, maybe being criticized. And if you look at the next slide, you can have an example of how this is being misused by disinformation actors. So this is a text by a few members of the parliament on creating a European compensation fund for victims of the COVID-19 vaccines. So there are some members of parliament who suggested this. There are a few. If you want to know the full, the official position, you go to an adopted document, and there you don't have a compensation fund for victims of the vaccine. So it's a part of the democratic debate, but we saw last spring a lot of spread like this from Julio, who is not really Julio, it's somebody like a fake account, said it's Spanish, but he said the European Parliament recognizes that 1 million people suffered from serious consequences of the vaccines. And they use this like a letter from a few MPs. It looks official, unless you're like a parliament specialist. You will have the impression that this is an authentic document from the European Parliament. And this is what we see a lot. Every week we see people pick and choose, and they find a quote, a few words here. Maybe it's not even a member of the parliament. It could be a guest speaking. We had a few years someone who suggested a meat tax, tax on meat, and to promote vegetarianism or something. And it was also pushed as the official parliament position. So we see this a lot. And it's in a way, it's easy and hard to fact check. It's easy, you can call one of my colleagues, but it's hard because if you try to find yourself, you will end up in this kind of ocean of different kind of documents. If you go to the next slide, we'll have a very different example. Parliament adopted a bit more than a year ago a resolution to declare Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. And we saw Russian official sources reacted. And on the same day, there was an attack on Parliament's website. And I think 1 or 2 days later, there was a rumor that the Wagner Group had sent a sledgehammer covered in blood to the European Parliament. And why would people do that? So in the end, we had a very important resolution, and somehow many journalists and other people started to talk about the internet, like cyber attacks, or the possibility or not of a sledgehammer being mailed to Parliament. And so this was a kind of hybrid attack to make people not talk about the content in the text, where MEPs criticized Russia and instead talk about a story that was not true about this bloody sledgehammer, or a few hours of interruption on the website. That could be another example. And then the third one is on the next slide. Yeah, we saw it also last spring. It was a week when we had big migration votes, and they would usually trigger a lot of interest. And then this video was pushed from 5 anonymous accounts. It says an MEP is taking cocaine in the chamber, and you have someone who looks a bit like a politician being somewhere which looks like a parliament, and he's taking something, right? And it was being pushed over and over again, shared more than all other content about parliament. So many fact checkers checked, and it's not the European Parliament. It's the German Parliament. It's a former member of the German Parliament. And if you look for his name, you will see he's someone who has repeatedly said, I have 2 passions in my life. One is fried potatoes, and the other one is kind of oral tobacco. So what we think, we're quite sure he's taking these completely legal tobacco. And it's being pushed to ridicule politicians. You saw in the middle, Russian diplomats saying, you know, maybe Zelensky could be an MEP because, you know, he doesn't have to learn anything. And it was pushed all over. So it's a kind of ridiculing politicians or people working with democracy by spreading this completely made up story using authentic clippings from the German parliament. It was so big, so our Director General, the spokesperson of the parliament, posted, that's the right part, like a reminder to fact check, and he shared what I just said and linked to several fact checkers who have debunked this story. It's, I mean, it's not what they say it is. So next slide. And now a bit about elections. We have elections for the European Parliament in June, but this year is also like a huge election year. You all know about the US elections in the end of the year, but there are elections taking place all over the world. And to kind of find out what to expect, we have looked at elections in national elections in different countries to see what trends are there. And something we see typically in small scale, but it's all over the place, is this stolen election. Many people try to, or actors try to have similar strategies as we've seen in the US and in Brazil, or that they have been predetermined. There are also in some countries that voting makes no difference, don't bother. And then you have this political business elite control everything, or they point at differences, problems in democracies and say democracies are hypocritical. Combined with this, it's also, if you're a disinformation actor, you can hijack any high-profile topic depending on what's big in the country at the moment. Russia, Ukraine, COVID, climate, environment, migration, equality issues. I'm sure we'll see a lot about the Middle East process. We haven't seen it in the recent European elections, but I'm sure it will come up. I'll share some examples if we show next slide. This is from a Danish example where people claim that the Quran forbids Muslims from voting. So in this case, they use a minority group. We have seen different other. And then the next, it's more of a hybrid incident. You know it probably better than me from Bulgaria, where you had bomb threats around several schools. So it was, I will not say more because you know the case much better than I do, but this could, of course, make people not go vote if they are afraid that there will be a bomb on the polling station. And next, please. And we've seen in a kind of tiny scale deep fakes. In Slovakia, it was kind of the first where people saw it. There were deep fake like conversations between candidates and journalists. Slovakian authorities accused Russia of election interference. We've seen it. Deep fake so far is really tiny, what we can see, but let's see how it develops. So if we go to next slide. Yeah, some examples. We have seen elections about, claims about manipulation with the pens, with the voting boxes, with fake polls, with some parties. Well, I will not go into details, but no matter how you vote, there will be something in there. Well, next slide. And what we've also seen, many countries try to go against it. You cannot kind of click on a button or have one law and fix it all. But what seems to work is a whole of society where everybody does a bit, and inside their everyday. If you have a strong media landscape, of course it helps, and also to communicate a lot about election technicalities, and also to tell people that we are aware. If there will be we are prepared. If there will be some errors, there are procedures to correct it. And general media literacy is also good. I think maybe we should go to the next. I will I saw there was a question about what to do against. I will not go into detail, but the EU has several actions in place. Ahead of the last elections, it was more of a voluntary basis. There was an action plan against disinformation. The first voluntary agreement between platforms and the EU, it's called the Code of Practice, where platforms promise to work against disinformation. And since then, we have more legislation, the Digital Services Act. We have new laws for transparency about political acts, and artificial intelligence is also on the way. So there are several things to do, but there are several things that you cannot do really with legislation. I can go, I think, skip 2 slides now. This is, yeah. And then one back. What you can do is, of course, to learn more. If you're attending today's webinar, it's already a big step. You can remind people to fact check if things seems too good or too bad to be true, and follow good journalist reporting is good. And if you see if you are fooled, it's not a big deal. We can all be fooled. We have all been fooled on kind of April Fool's Day, but then you warn your friends so they don't repeat the same. If you want to know more about the European Parliament, we have a network called Together EU. You can attend, learn more about elections. Some of them are into disinformation, some are more general, and use your vote every time you can. That's it for me. Thanks a lot. And here is where you can find more information. Yeah.
Thank you, Sara. Thank you so much for this presentation. We have some questions for you. We will wait till the beginning of the discussion. Until then, we have one more speaker, last but not least. This is Dr. Kiely. A few words about him. Kiely is a researcher at the Gates Institute with extensive experience in data analysis and research in both industry and academia. He earned his PhD in politics from Queen's University Belfast, focusing on United States foreign policy, discourse, and national identity. His research interests include misinformation and propaganda, identity politics, and political philosophy. Kate, the stage is yours. Happy to see you.
Hello, thank you very much for the welcome. Just to address an initial issue of misinformation, my name is Keith, not Kate, Keith Kiely, but a small.
Sorry so much.
Oh, no problem.
In person.
No problem.
And still.
Just to thank you all for the invite, and thank my fellow speakers for such interesting and kind of relevant discussions. I think Sara's talk will actually cover some ground, but with some respectful difference of perception on the issue. So what I'll focus on here is essentially Bulgaria's the dynamics of disinformation narratives here in Bulgaria. I'm also the coordinator of the Bulgarian-Romanian Observatory on Digital Media, which is the EDMO hub here in Bulgaria. So we're working quite closely on the issue of misinformation and disinformation here on the ground. If I can just start this. Just let me know when it goes to presentation. Okay, great. So I will start by saying that as we all who are in Bulgaria and across Europe, I'm sure know that Bulgarian society is facing significant challenges with respect to disinformation and misinformation. And those challenges it would be too simplistic in our view, my view at least, to assign all of those challenges to one external political actor. Those challenges are influenced by unique political, geographical, historical, and social contexts. So we're talking here about factors like economic disparity, political instability, geographical and geopolitical issues, historical and cultural contexts, and social contexts as well. So all of these things and more recent events such as Russia's war in Ukraine contribute to these issues. Of course, on top of all this, then we have the legacy of communist rule, and then the transition from communist rule to neoliberal economic and political models. They've also had a pretty significant impact. What essentially we need, in my view, is we need to think about when looking at the issue is what are the underlying mechanisms which enable these disinformation narratives to be successful, to enable them to catch root within a society and to diffuse widely. And when doing so, you cannot ignore things in Bulgaria, such as its continuing struggle with poverty, high mortality rates, migration rates, low life expectancy, economic inequality, and addressing the issues requires an understanding of these. So I will briefly lay out some of these, what I call pain points within Bulgarian society. So the first one that I would like to look at is media ownership or media capture. So the influence of concentrated media ownership in promoting a private and political interests over a more diverse range of viewpoints is well known here in Bulgaria. Independent media are often targeted and subjected to legal actions, often leading to a lack of trust in mainstream political and media institutions. The influence of political and economic factors, along with transparency issues around both the media and the political establishment here in Bulgaria, contributes to this environment and causes a widespread level of distrust among the population. Survey after survey indicates this. It also emphasizes that while Russian disinformation campaigns are a major concern, the distrust in media and institutions is also due to long-standing issues like corruption and inequality. In other terms, the social media platforms, in terms of the Code of Practice, for example, or the Digital Services Act, which was brought up by Sara, there is issues here with content moderation in the local language. So we often see significant levels of disinformation, coordinated disinformation campaigns, which are captured in other countries, but which are not captured in Bulgarian because of the language issues and because of lack of moderation from social media platforms in Bulgarian. Since the end of communist rule, as I mentioned earlier as well, Bulgaria has seen and relatively the highest level of income inequality, leading to a lot of social division, political polarization, and a genuine lack of trust in political institutions long before the war in Ukraine. Corruption and specific policies have contributed to this trend. And this has been further exacerbated, and obviously by these disinformation campaigns, which latch on to this lack of distrust in order to diffuse specific narratives, which kind of link to those pain points. In this case, let's say anti-Western, anti-EU, anti-NATO sentiments, as opposed to pro-Russian, pro-Putin, pro that kind of sentiment. Bulgaria has, as we know here locally, faced a huge amount of political instability with several difficulties in forming a stable government. There have been multiple elections, coalition collapses, resignations, and there's a really fragmented political landscape and polarized society. And these are revolving around concerns about corruptions, about sanctions, about low voter turnout. And all of these things have contributed to public distrust in those institutions. After the most recent general elections or parliamentary elections in April 2023, a minority government was formed by the coalition of We Continue to Change and Democratic Bulgaria, with participation minimally from the long-standing ruling party CERV. And we see that in that election, for example, CERV only achieved 20% of the votes. And, there was less than a 40% turnout in that election, echoing what Sara has been saying about a lack of participation or a lack of belief in the democratic process. And that trust is continuously kind of represented within surveys done within the country, where up to 70% of the population lack trust in the government, or 80% lack trust in the specific parliament. A more recent survey in the autumn of 2023 on the parliamentary elections found that 82% of respondents had a negative review of the government, while only 9 to 11% had a positive assessment. And that's the lowest negative rating towards the government. Just to put that in context, the lowest negative rating towards the government was 51% in January of 2022, and the highest positive rating was 29% in that same period. Almost half of Bulgarians, 47% to be precise, believe that local elections were unfair, and only 19% believe they were fair. The supporters of certain political groups obviously have differing opinions on the fairness of elections. The traditionalist kind of mainstream parties, which are the centrist, center-right parties like Continue to Change and Democratic Bulgaria and GERB and SDS, both pro-Europe, they have a higher share of supporters who believe that the elections are fair. Supporters of the centrist DPS, which is a kind of an ethnic minority support base, they were divided on the issue of fairness, while supporters of the centrist left Bulgarian Socialist Party, the kind of legacy of the Communist Party here, and the right-wing nationalist revivalist and pro-Russian revival group, Vazrajne, believed that the elections were completely unfair. The high level of political apathy in Bulgaria then can kind of, with many people believing that the elections aren't fair, and also believing that the elections won't bring about any significant change. This is because of a long-term trend and a long-term lack of trust. One of the more kind of serious questions that Bulgarians face that is not often mentioned in terms of its effect on disinformation narratives is the impact of how social disparities and inequalities have affected the demographic pressures on the country. So all of the things that I've talked about in the post-communist era and market reforms, the growth of private capital, limited redistribution, all of these have contributed to what the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund characterize as a rise of inequality. Initially, people accepted this growing inequality as kind of the price of the new opportunities that would come with the transition. But over time, this tolerance, it's been shown in surveys, waned as it became evident that the distribution of income was trending in a negative direction consistently. And dissatisfaction obviously arises then when you have such a trend on a long-term basis. And, you know, Bulgaria falls further behind the living standards of the more advanced economies in Europe. So there is a conscious political and economic choice here, which is involved in this creation of distrust. And that is rooted in perceived corruption and perceived economic priorities within the country, which neglect the population as a whole. And that does lead to, as I said, a high level of distrust in political institutions. Trend, for example, who work out of Sofia University, conducted a survey in September of 2023 with over 1,000 respondents over the age of 18. And that survey was formed as part of, I think, something else that Sara mentioned, which was the Bulgarian socialists who worked with the European socialists in the EU Parliament. And the survey found that 76% of respondents believed that low income was a major factor for low birth rates in the country. And 52% cited a lack of economic security for their decision not to have children. Additionally, 27% of respondents claimed that they would leave Bulgaria and emigrate due to better economic opportunities abroad. Conversely, importing labor from abroad into Bulgaria, then it's also viewed highly negatively because immigrants, are seen as potential competition in a very competitive labor market, which is low income. And low income is a major issue for those under the age of 30, and especially in rural towns and villages, for their reasons to leave, and that kind of desertification of the rural areas of Bulgaria, which also has a tremendous impact on notions of Bulgarian traditional identity. Respondents also noted that they had high levels of stress, particularly those between the age of 30 to 60, because of these economic issues. These are university graduates, and they're living in the capital, generally speaking. And the surveys concluded that these fears make the population extremely vulnerable to this type of disinformation, misinformation, manipulation. Between East and West, then, this is where Bulgaria finds itself at this particular moment. The historical, social, economic, and cultural relationship between Russia and Bulgaria, I mean, it's complex. It has various aspects, including Orthodox Christianity, linguistic and cultural traditions, historical alliances, the legacy of the Soviet era. Of course, the Soviet era was marked by a period of kind of strong economic, political, and military cooperations between the two, obviously with Bulgaria having little choice in this, with Bulgarian population having little choice in this. And Bulgaria has historically relied on Russian energy resources and has a strong trade relationship with the country. Recent polls again show that some Bulgarians view Russia as a more important strategic partner than the United States. However, since the fall of the communist regime, there has been a large swell and a large shift towards aligning with a Euro-Atlantic perspective. And this is obviously a reaction to, not being happy with the previous relationship with Russia and the horrors that came with that. Bulgaria's integration into the European Union and NATO and the challenges that it faces in balancing its relationships with Russia, Europe, and the United States are also very prevalent in the modern political environment. It mentions that Bulgarians have varying views on the invasion by Russia of Ukraine, with a significant portion believing that Russia didn't invade Ukraine and that the West provoked Russia. That's just a clear Russian propaganda narrative, right? These attitudes are not limited either to one specific age group, like older people who were around during the communist period, but both younger and older respondents seem to share these views on the same types of percentage responses. Many respondents feel that the EU itself dictates policy to Bulgaria without considering the influence or the opinions of Bulgarians in general. So they feel that the EU acts in undemocratic fashion. Bulgaria is particularly vulnerable to Russian propaganda. This is absolutely a fact, especially as a member of NATO and of the EU. And the Kremlin's hybrid warfare strategy obviously aims to influence domestic politics in Bulgaria and prevent the country from becoming a stronger regional partner for NATO and also for the EU. However, it's the focus on Russian disinformation campaigns as the only reason for this overlooks internal factors which give space for Russian influence to thrive. Russian disinformation campaigns would not work if these pain points did not exist. And I will move on to two case studies that, in my view at least, demonstrate this. So we have done two pieces of research very quickly, one on Ukrainian refugees in the first year of the war in Ukraine and how Bulgarians viewed Ukrainian refugees. And we broke these disinformation narratives down into general topics and then into subtopics based on those general topics using entity extraction, discourse analysis, all those, I won't go into it, it's too long to explain the methodology. But we can see that for the case one, which is the Ukrainian refugees, that economic issues were by far the top issues which disinformation, misinformation narratives revolved around, particularly the idea that Bulgarians were somehow being victimized by programs that supported Ukrainian refugees and that Ukrainian refugees were somehow economically dishonest. You often saw things like Bulgarian pensioners are struggling to survive, meanwhile Ukrainian refugees are staying at seaside resorts, right? So that kind of appeal to these strongly emotional outrages that Bulgarians feel towards the economic struggles they face within their society were very prevalent. We also see social issues coming up. So we see things like Ukrainian refugees don't respect Bulgaria or Bulgarians. They're ungrateful to Bulgarians. They commit criminal acts. They don't follow traffic laws, all this kind of stuff. And this kinds of stuff come up to talk about how essentially, you know, Bulgaria is being taken advantage of in some way. And this feeling again that the Bulgarian people on a social level, as well as an economic level, are being victimized by the government's policies towards Ukrainian refugees. In terms of the war itself, of course, we had a very high level of pro-Russian and anti-NATO narratives about the war. We had some narratives which said that only specific types of Ukrainians, for example, wealthy ones, are fleeing the war, and that Bulgaria should have a more neutral position on the war because supporting the Ukrainian regime under Zelensky is harmful to Bulgaria. And of course, the US was also seen as having ulterior geopolitical motives for their support of Zelensky in Ukraine. Then we have politics and actions. I won't go into all these because I don't have the time, but essentially the main theme is that the Bulgarian political establishment is ignoring Bulgarians in order to and their hardships in order to please Western governments and Western leadership for economic and political gain. Culture obviously was a big one too. Just to say something briefly on that, the idea that Bulgarian identity and Bulgarian culture is severely under threat, and that there is an effort to westernize or dilute Bulgarian culture. These appeared. So all of these touch on the demographic, the financial, the social, all of these pain points that I've outlined earlier. The same was true on the issue of the Euro referendum. We find specifically economic not so prevalent which is strange considering it's an economic issue as in terms of the refugee issue. But economic topics for disinformation narratives were again on top, followed by social issues. For example, there should be a referendum. The Bulgarian people should be consulted. The Bulgarian people are being manipulated. There's propaganda in favor of the euro. People saying that anyone against the euro on the other side of things are Russian bots or trolls, which is of course a ridiculous statement to make because you can have a position economically against the euro without being a Russian bot or troll. Demonstrates the highly kind of split division between polarized division between the Bulgarian public on these issues. And I'll finish up there because I don't have time to go through everything else. But my main point, I think, would be that it is quite simple for us to kind of, and it is a kind of, in my view at least, a worrying trend to see in popular academic and political discourse to disproportionately attribute the spread of disinformation and misinformation exclusively to Russian disinformation campaigns. This is an easy out, which requires us to point the finger at others and not look internally and view what is happening internally within our society, which are creating gaps, which are creating weaknesses, which external parties can then exploit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. Sorry again. Amazing presentations. So now it's time for the discussion. I have prepared some questions, and I'm asking the audience to ask questions if they have some for our amazing panelists. I'm going to start with questions to the most famous speaker among us today, Wara. This is you. I have wondered some things, and I really want to ask you. First, have you ever found yourself being misled while sharing your content, or unintentionally misleading your audience and spreading some misinformation? Because I know that you wouldn't have this intent to cause some damage, so misinformation. And how do you react in this situation, or actually how would you react in such a situation? Moreover, how do you manage hate speech and trolls? We always say that the trolls shouldn't be responded because they actually this actually empowers them, but is this enough? What do you think about? And last but not least, having in mind your expertise in EU law, what do you think about the current social media moderations and regulations? Especially, what do you think about the Digital Service Act? Thank you very much.
Thank you for all those questions. I cannot guarantee that I will remember every single one of them, but I'm going to try my best. First of all, what is like my experience, I guess, with misinformation, if I ever have spread that consciously or unconsciously, and what I did about that. I personally don't really talk about actual news or happenings. I really focus more on entertainment. But I did notice, for example, that's related to beauty, but it can kind of make sense with information. I posted a story where it's trying a new viral hack to curl your lashes. I know it sounds very superficial, but bear with me. And actually that story had like 30,000 views, and I usually get a lot less. And I was like, oh, what is happening? And then a lot of people texted me, actually making me aware that this is a very dangerous technique, because I use my blow dryer and it can really cause to get your eyes really dry, and in the worst cases even blindness. And so I really noticed that I have actually such a huge responsibility, because I am spreading like a tip that actually is really bad for you, and this can be potentially very dangerous. So then I actually took the footage, put it in the back, and created a reel where I said, never do this, and why it's dangerous, and what you should do instead. So it's really following that same rhetoric. And you can use that to actually for something positive. If you see a fake news, you can say, okay, this is completely wrong, this is misleading, and I'm going to tell you what's the truth. You can use it for having a positive impact. So I guess at that scale, I noticed how quickly, when something is shocking or different, you can really have a big impact and a lot of views, and you should be careful. And that was really like a aha moment for me. Like, you cannot just see something online, even for myself, and be like, oh, that's so great, it works, and do it on yourself if it can potentially be harmful to people. So I think that's just learning as you grow and as you post, because it starts to get very familiar. People look up to you. It kind of feels like they're your friends, and you can just share whatever, but you do have a responsibility. So I think it really depends on your intent. If you're well intended, then you can use it for, you know, spreading the truth, spreading useful information. And unfortunately, not everyone is like this, and that's why I think it can be such a positive thing, social media, while it also can be such a negative thing. The other questions that you asked me, hang on.
Okay, I asked you about hate speech and trolls.
Oh yeah. Oh, they're there. They're lovely. I think it's about getting thick skin. I usually try to always be very kind to people, make everyone happy, but I noticed pretty quickly that that is not possible on social media, because people will just say things to you that they would never in real life. In real life, you would never go up to someone in the street and be like, by the way, I hate your hair, you're ugly, and I don't like what you're saying, and it's just bullshit, people will not be that straight up to you. So I think you really have to learn to take a step back and be like, okay, some people are gonna like what I do and others are not gonna like it, because there's not much in between. Either people love you or they hate you. So for me, that created this kind of balance of I'm just normal, I'm neutral, and I'm trying to do good. And it's, yeah, just created that emotional balance that now I'm really fine with. But it's definitely a process, I would say.
Yeah, everybody is very strong on social media. Yeah, it's not the same in person. Okay, my third question was about do you think the social media nowadays are well moderated? And can you share some of your thoughts, having in mind your European law expertise about the Digital Service Act?
I'm not super familiar, I have to be honest, with this Digital Service Act, because my studies, they do date back to 3 years ago. I did already some research with the internet, but I haven't really researched that. I just know the broad lines. I'm sorry for that. I should have done more research. But I do think it's very difficult to regulate social media, because it's basically based on all this emotionality, and that is what works, the human psychology. And it's hard to then regulate, because this model is working so much. You have to regulate those tech giants. But I do think we have to do that, because we cannot let that free market spread. So that is, I guess, my broad opinion about it, but I don't know the exact checkpoint, the exact rules or legislation that are in place at the moment, but it's definitely something that I will get informed about.
Okay, and I have a follow-up question here, the last one, because
Yeah.
I don't see a question for the audience, but I'm really interested in this.
Yeah, sure.
Because I'm also a fact checker, and I love the tools. We are going to talk about the tools in the next session. So everybody stay with us till the next panel. Are there any tools for gathering information and trends about TikTok? Tools like CrowdTangle for Facebook and Instagram, if you're familiar with it. Tools which make us analyze the trends in this social media.
They are tools in place. I know there are apps you can download to immediately see which trends are popping up, what is spreading really quickly. I just never did that, because you have to pay for that, and I'm a very organic researcher. So what I will always do, if I want new information about something, I will straight up go to the app, not the For You page, because that is just a mix of everything. I will go to the research bar, and actually you have some filters, so you can enter your keywords, and then you can add the filter posted in the last 24 hours, in the last week, in the last 3 days, in the last month. So that way I always know if I want a certain information or something, I can see when that issue last arose, that topic, when it was talked about, if it's something new. I know that something is on trend if it just happened, let's say 3-4 days ago, and people keep posting. I would say after 3 weeks it starts to get a bit old. So you can do that with just keywords about anything that you heard about. So that's what I use personally.
Thank you so much for the answers. I want to ask you to share these apps, if you can, in the chat or later with the audience. The paid one, as you said. Okay, we have a question for Sara. This one is interesting, and it's concerning EACEA again. Why is not possible to take WIBO actions against the sources of disinformation, or use other legal measures against entities or even governments? The question started a little discussion in the chat, so we're interested to hear what you can say about it.
Yeah, it's to take legal action. It's tricky, right? So there are some things that are illegal. If you think about child pornography or trying to make people into terrorists, that's illegal, and there you can take legal action. If you look at disinformation, you remember this slide I had with all the different sources, they're authentic. And if you want to push only one opinion and make it flood the internet and make everybody think that this is the only true and the only opinion, it's not illegal. So you have to work in other, like media literacy. Of course, there are some things like the platforms, they have their kind of internal rules that you cannot steal someone's personality. You should like use their tools in a kind of normal way and not create fake accounts and organize them to push something. You could have, you talked about trolls and hate speech or threat. This is also not legal, so you can go there, but it's like a big patchwork. And if we try to say, and as Keith said earlier, it's often based on a problem that exists. So if you have someone who is angry about something, you could not, if you go against this person, it would attack freedom of speech and the democratic debate. Then if other actors who try to make chaos and they like polarization, they kind of push the two most extreme positions and try to make us believe that only these two exist, and they disagree 100%. It's really bad, but I don't think in most cases it's not illegal. So it's tricky. The special committee looked into different ways. Of course, you could have sanctions. There are some in some cases, if it's maybe you're aware of the suspension of Russia Today and Sputnik's, since but this is not because of, well, it's because of their role supporting Russia's war against Ukraine. If you have another site pushing exactly the same messages, it's legal. And the special committee looked at many different ways to counter disinformation. Very few of them are legal actions, because you would end up censoring things or killing the debate you try to protect. There are things you can do, but it's complex. Yeah, and just a short. Since Keith mentioned a lot, like you shouldn't put all the blame in one actor, the Kremlin. It happened. I was a bit distracted when I so I probably forgot to say we use a lot of information from this special team looking into pro-Kremlin disinformation, because it's like the biggest or one of the biggest sources of disinformation targeted in the EU. But it's not the only action. It's the one we know a lot about and we can learn a lot. Many other actors, domestic actors, other foreign actors, people who don't want to spread disinformation, they just happen to have the same opinion as some pro-Kremlin actors. I mean, they're all there, and it's yeah, big and complex landscape.
Okay, thank you
Hope
for this.
This helped. Yeah.
Thank you for this answer. I have another question for you, a little context. In the Department of European Studies in Sofia University here in Bulgaria, we made this vast media content analysis research about the media coverage of the pre-election campaign in 2019. So we couldn't manage to report about the actual disinformation messages because we didn't have the resources to fact check everything. There were 34 media in the research, more than 3,000 news units, so it was impossible to do it. But we had this question about how often the issues related to disinformation are mentioned. And the results showed that this issue, it's not even in the agenda in Bulgaria. I mean, politicians, they're not talking about how serious the problem is. They're not talking about what we should do about it, and it's like it's not there. But in the meanwhile, the disinformation is there, and we can see it on on a daily basis in social media. So having in mind that probably we're expecting even bigger wave of disinformation during the upcoming elections, we're thinking in our team, could the pre-bunking strategy be, let's say, more efficient and a long-term solution to this problem? What do you think about pre-bunking, and do you have any insights? Is it efficient enough, effective enough?
Yeah, I'll try to. So pre-bunking could be good, and it's not harmful. For instance, we try to, when we talk to groups of visitors, for instance, we try to mention this narrative about the stolen elections. Of course, there could be real problems with elections. So if people hear or see something, it might be worth checking them, because there could be a real problem. But it's good for people to be aware that another attack against our trust in the electoral process could be just exaggerating small errors, or making them up, or using completely fake stories. Like in some countries, they say that the ink of the pen will disappear, or it will be manipulated, so that they know that if you hear someone saying that there is tricks or fraudulent elections, of course it's good to check, because you want the elections to be safe, but it could also be just decreasing the trust, right? So pre-bunking in that sense is good. When you say that people don't talk so much about disinformation, we always have this kind of dual. We want to warn people and make them aware of the risks, but we don't want the disinformation actors to completely control the debate. If you remember the example of the resolution criticizing Russia, what the European Parliament wanted was to talk about what Russia is doing. And if you end up talking about internet or cyber attacks, or you talk about fake stories about bloody hammers being sent via post, you're kind of lost, because you wanted to criticize Russia. And if you end up speaking about disinformation or cyber attacks, so that could sometimes be an explanation why you don't talk so much about disinformation. Like the European elections in June, I hope they will be about political choices for the future. How do we solve a climate change crisis, or challenges linked to migration, how the social problems in different countries? I hope it will be about that, and that the discussion about disinformation will only be a very, very small part, because it's an important political choice, and I hope the debate will be about that. And you have to keep the proportions right, if it makes sense.
It makes. Thank you very much. We have another question to Laura. Do you think it's possible to have a sort of ethic code among influencers, similar to media, in which you agree to spread only verified information and content? It's a question from Asenia. Thank you, Asenia.
It's a great question. Actually, I already have that. I have it either with certain brands that I work with, that actually when I sign to promote their product, I also sign an ethics code that I will not spread misinformation about the product. Or I also work with an agency. I'm in Switzerland. I'm based there in Zurich, and they propose me a lot of different collabs throughout the year. But I do have a general ethic codes for the whole year that I like always say when I advertise, that I will mention it, and in the way I conduct really my content, that it's never, that I don't use any hated speech or things like that. So at the moment, the responsibility is really on the businesses. So I think it could be a good idea to have general principles that you follow, because I don't know exactly how it's in every legal system in Europe, but I know in Switzerland, for example, it took a long time to have like actual rules for us influencers, because it was so new and Switzerland is such a small market. But now, for example, we have to we cannot mislead viewers when we do an ad to not mention it. And that was before a lot like that in the stories. You just said, oh, guys, I found this great product. And that was actually a paid ad. And I really saw the shift in the industry of now everyone mentioning it, and the brands also asking you to mention. So I do think there has been a progression, and having like a general document with principles could actually be very beneficial. We already have that with businesses like big businesses like L'Oreal, brands that, you know, care about their reputation. But I see other influencers that work more with drop shipping brands that are based in Dubai, and obviously they don't care as much. So I think having a general document to just orient the influencer a bit, because it's such an unregulated industry and we're all just trying our best, I think that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
If I may, excuse me, I think there is one in Finland. I talked to colleagues in Finland, and the influencers in Finland. I have the link somewhere in English. I'll see if I can share it in the chat if I find it before the end. Sorry.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Keith, I had 2 questions for you, but you were so detailed that you answered them both. So I can see a question from the audience about you. So maybe we will finish this session 4 minutes earlier. It's time for a lunch break, everybody. But before that, I would like to have your attention just for a little bit more. In a few seconds, you will see in your screens the QR code for the short survey, the same from the coffee break. So please take a few minutes to fill it, and I'm sure that you know how important feedback is actually. So thank you in advance. And also, we look forward to your presence in our 3rd panel, which will be in half an hour. The 3rd session promises to be the most practical one, so please ensure you don't miss it. See you soon, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Bozhidar, for moderating this session, and to all of our speakers. I've been shocked by submarine explosions and examples of bombs outside polling stations, and also now questioning the deep mistrust within Bulgarian society and where this comes up. So many thoughts coming in. We do have a half an hour break now. To the question also in the chat, we will start again at past. So this, actually at on the hour. So this is 1 o'clock for us, potentially it's 2 o'clock for yourself. So we see you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.